Good evening, everyone. It's December 23, 2012. I'm Rene Ritchie, and tonight we're discussing the year that was and the year that's coming up. This is the iMore Show.
They're backing up.
If you'd just go down I-87 and bring the backup straight to my cottage, I'd appreciate it.
Recording.
All right. So tonight, Seth, we are going to talk about the year that was, and I guess the world ending. No, I mean, it was an interesting, exciting year. It was the first year without Steve Jobs in control of Apple in a long, long time. It was Tim Cook's, what's the American word for it? Was it his freshman year, his sophomore year? I forget which one comes first.
Yeah, freshman.
His freshman year as Apple CEO. And I think he did a really decent job. Obviously, the stock spiked towards the middle of the year, went up to around $700. It has come down since to around $500. But he oversaw the most massive product release at least in my memory for Apple.
Yeah, I think anybody looking at this past year and saying anything other than it was successful, regardless of what you think ought to have happened or what you think might have happened, were Steve still around. Tim Cook
right? You mean Wozniak?
Right, of course.
Yeah.
Tim Cook did a phenomenal job. The company did not implode. Obviously, there's a lot still happening in a positive direction. Like you said, the stock price, I think year over year is up something like 40% or something like that.
Sockroll is saying 27% in the chat room.
Okay, 27%. Yeah, I mean, you can't look at this year and the successes and the products and say anything other than it was another good year. Like you can argue it wasn't the best year, or you can argue where the weaknesses were, but the facts are that they sold a metric ton of new products. And he had said something a couple weeks ago. I forget the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of some really ridiculous percentage, whether it was 60 or 80% of their current revenue was being generated on products that were released in the last 6 weeks or something like that, referring to, the new phone and the iPad mini and the Retina iPad. And that's amazing when you think about that. Like, I don't know a single other company that can put up those kind of numbers in that kind of time.
Yeah, because I mean, like, Microsoft makes a ton of their revenue off of Office and Windows, but they don't release those once a year, certainly not a couple times a year, as was the case with the iPad this year.
Right.
What do you think about that? That was interesting, too. It was the first time that an iOS device made an appearance more than once a year. They released the third generation iPad with Retina display in March, and then they released the fourth generation iPad, also with Retina display, but also with Lightning connector and international LTE and better cameras in October. Yeah,
it felt weird at first and kind of uncomfortable. Like, your first time at summer camp where you don't really know what's going on, but it'll probably be fun, so you just go along with it.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was the initial, holy crap, what are they doing? And, does this reset the whole product line and what happens in March now? And I mean, that kind of speculation is still going on. But the sentiment was, for the iPad mini, it was, we've got this thing we wanted to do and here it is, and we don't want to wait. And for the Retina iPad update, the comment was, we've got our foot on the gas or something like that. We're not letting up. And
it's basically both foot on the gas and pedal to the metal. It was a double metaphor.
Right. And it's basically just that. It's like, we had this stuff ready. We're releasing it. I don't think something tells me they wouldn't do more than a twice yearly bump like that. I think people would start to clamor a little bit if it came out
monthly iPads.
Yeah, I think, that'd be pushing it.
iPad June, iPad July.
Yeah, but they said, when we have stuff ready, we're bringing it to market. When it's ready, it's going to be out there. And if that means once a year, twice yearly, that's seemingly what's going to happen from now on. And it begs a lot of questions as to what is going to occur in the spring. Are there going to be no products? Is there going to be yet another Rev? A lot of rumors are going around, and there's a lot of stuff that's circulating to that end. And I'm just curious to see what actually happens in the spring.
I mean, before we get to the spring, I just want to back up for 1 second. Part of what made it awkward to me is they said all this brouhaha about the new iPad in March. They so specifically called it the new iPad. Everything was the new iPad. Then in October, it was the fourth generation iPad or the iPad with Retina display. And that new thing, it kind of fell flat when in the same year, the new iPad was no longer the new iPad. I'm not quite sure what was going on with Apple's typically awesome branding engine at that time.
Yeah, I know that was the cause of much consternation for people, and I feel like it was more of a debate than it needed to be. But you're right. I mean, it was kind of a strange departure, and now they've gone to a more verbose, explanatory title for the product, which isn't quite as pleasant to say, but it's exactly what you're getting. So there's really no misunderstanding it. And I think that may be why they went to that. It is that they went from one extreme to the other, right? It was iPad, iPad 2, then it was the new iPad,
Yeah.
which really we know meant iPad third generation. And then this is, iPad with Retina display, parentheses, fourth generation, right? So
the new iPad was no longer new. The Retina iPad was one of two Retina iPads. It was unclean.
I think they've gone, that pendulum is swung back entirely in the other direction. And while it is a little bit clumsy, there's no mistaking what the product actually is. And obviously with the Mini, I mean, it's completely different. It's tiny, so.
It's delineated by size.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to get to the Mini in a second because you put up a really interesting blog post about that. But you mentioned looking forward to the spring. Now, Apple really has, Phil Schiller said that about using the word new iPad. We wanted to mix things up, change expectations. We didn't want to be predictable. And certainly the fourth generation iPad in the fall wasn't predictable. Does that mean that Apple's going to keep not being predictable? I mean, you can never always be non-predictable because the non-predictable thing becomes predictable. But could we see a spring where there's an iPhone 5S, where there's an iPad Mini 2, maybe an iPad Mini Retina, maybe an iPad 5, maybe an iPad 5 with the iPad Mini's thinner, lighter design language? I mean, how fast can Apple go, given that within the realm of physics, there's only so many changes you can make to a device?
Right. I think that as per Tim's comment, that they're going to do this stuff when it's ready and when they feel they want to. There's a definite possibility that March could be an entirely new revision for all of this hardware if they've got it ready to go. Mm-hmm. I think that there's probably more of a chance for the iPads to be updated, only because the phone still is like tied to the carriers, and there's still that notion of contracts, despite people breaking contracts and doing different things. I think that the phone annually feels more right, feels more natural, and I think that it may. I mean, they could surprise us and totally do this, but it might cause issues if they have that kind of like mid-year release for the phone. If people just entered new contracts and don't want to break.
But Seth, Motorola Razr Max, HTC One X, One XS. I mean, it's being done on the other side of the fence.
Yeah, it is, and I think that part of Apple's success in the market is really the fact that they don't inundate people with choices. They really just have one or two things that you need to make a decision between. And I think if they continue to update things too frequently, especially if they keep those products on the market, like right now we've got the free iPhone 4, the 4S, and the 5.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty clean product line for everybody from people who want the latest and greatest, people who don't really need the latest and greatest, but want a solid device that has, Siri and stuff like that. And then people that want basically the free iPhone. Like, what happens if they release a 5S in March? Like, which phone goes away? Does the 5 go away? Does the 5 become the 4S? Like, how does the line shift? And maybe they don't care, and they're just like, yep, everything gets bumped down, and that's that. We're all Retina now, and now we're going to go, even more big screens.
There was 3 in the bed, and the little one said, roll over, roll over.
Yeah, I can't tell you the last time I actually heard that, but...
Do you prefer the monkeys jumping on the bed? One fell down and bumped his head. You're going to be reading all of these to little Clifford very soon.
Thinking about that, I have a little baby now. I should really brush up on this stuff.
Brush up on your kitty stuff.
But yeah, I mean, the product line is I think a little bit different than with the tablets, and I think it'd be easier for them to rev the iPads than the phones. But that how the hell would I know? Maybe they're going to totally blow our doors off. I think maybe part of the reason for that is to be unpredictable. I mean, previously,
we saw companies program against Apple. They knew Apple was in a yearly schedule. The iPhone came out every June. So at around CES time, there would be a Nexus 1, and all the geeks would swoon to that because everyone had an iPhone for 6 months, and it was the new hot thing, and it got a lot of attention because it was like the mid-season replacement phone for an iPhone. And then it came around 2010, and Apple did not release a phone in the summer. They waited 16 months to release a new phone, and people were suddenly, we don't know when Apple's releasing now, and it came out in the fall. And they thought, oh, we're going to have another year until the new iPad, and boom, new iPad comes out roughly 6 months later. I wonder about how much of that is to show that Apple can do what they want when they want, and they're not going to stick just to a 12-month cycle anymore. I don't know. I don't want to say the F word on a Christmas show, but just to mess with people.
No, I think there may be an element of that to it, in that there is a certain predictability to their product release cycles, and to a lot of observers, that seems to border on stagnation. Like, oh, it's always going to be this one thing, and then, of course, there's the tidal wave of underwhelm that follows when it doesn't completely rip holes in the universe for,
We read the spoilers and we get upset that we know what's going to happen.
Exactly. So I think part of it may be just to throw people curveballs and say, like, well, guess what? Here's another phone. Here's another tablet. What now?
Bazinga.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe they do. Maybe they are adopting a more aggressive market strategy for multiple reasons. One is, let's just keep doing the latest and greatest so that we can continue to run laps around people, And the other one is, we're not going to let people game plan us based on, our previous calendar. We're going to completely do stuff when we want to do it, which is kind of what they did, pulling out of Macworld and doing their own events and stuff like that.
The gadget equivalent of a crazy Ivan.
Yeah, they want to control everything from the news cycle to people's expectations to, the market, and at top to bottom, they want it all. So maybe we will see phones more frequently, which is going to be tough for a lot of people who, maybe out of contract, maybe renewed a contract and didn't get an upgrade.
But see, why? This is the thing I don't understand. I'm a gadget lover. A new thing comes out, I want to buy it, but I'm not angry at Apple for putting it out. It seems like they can't win. If Apple waits a year, they're slow, they're stagnating, they're not keeping up. Samsung's putting out all these devices. Apple's a failure. If they dare to put out something that's under a year, like the iPad, Apple's screwing me. I just bought that one. Apple doesn't care about me. It's like they're a jerk if they do and a jerk if they don't.
Well, yeah, some people definitely see it that way. I wasn't inferring that people would be angry. Of course, they will be.
It's like Tim Cook comes to their house and breaks their iPad right in front of them.
I know. Some segment of the population will always be angry at that because there has been a certain reliability to those purchases, and if that becomes upset, then they don't really know how to handle that. I was thinking more just in terms of like somebody like me financially who really probably can do the upgrade, but it's like, oh man, like I wasn't planning on it, and okay, you got me. Need to have it.
Here's my baby food money. There you go.
And I mean, somebody in my position, I really can't fuss too much because I can say things like I need to have it, and the truth of the matter is I don't really need to have it, but at the same time, it's like we get, when new things come out, the first thing out of our clients' mouths is like, so do you have the new thing yet? Can we support the new thing? Can we do this? So like, we're kind of expecting.
Your client's not Microsoft. I get it. Well, like my father, he just upgraded from an iPhone 4 to an iPhone 5. He didn't buy an iPhone 4S, had no interest in it. Then he called me, I got an iPhone 5. How do I use this Siri thing? My sister just upgraded from an iPhone 3GS to an iPhone 4. She has no interest. Whenever she needs to upgrade, she'll get whatever she can get at a low price, and she doesn't need anything more. So I just wonder for every one of us, I wonder how many normal people just don't even think about stuff like this.
Oh, tons. I mean, tons. A lot of people are still looking at a free iPhone 4 as like, well, why would I pay any money at all? I can get this iPhone.
It's free.
It looks like the other one. Why would I even buy it?
You noticed that? Have you gone back and picked up your iPhone 4 or iPhone 4S lately? I cannot believe. I thought the iPhone 5 looked unnaturally tall and gangly, like a lanky, pubescent child at a certain point. And then I went to do some work on my iPhone 4S yesterday, and it was like an iPhone mini. It was stunted. I can't believe how short the screen is.
I know. Even after like a week of using the 5, I went back to the 4S because I I unlocked the 2 that we had so we can take them overseas the next time we travel. Since we left AT&T, and you're allowed to do that. And just even holding it and walking through the settings to make sure that went through, I was like, God, this thing is so squat and heavy and
so few icons on the home screen.
It's like a fat nano. It's weird.
It really, really is. It's just getting back to Tim Cook for a second. I mean, he isn't Steve Jobs. Nothing could be clearer that he is not Steve Jobs. But it seems like he has a love for Apple and a love for product, even though he's not a product guy. He did an interview on NBC. He had an interview in Bloomberg Business Week. They were both very similar. He very much stayed on message. He did a performance. It wasn't anything off the cuff or candid, but it came through that even though he's not Steve Jobs, he has a lot of the same core values. And the management shuffle that he did, I think, was one of the biggest things this year, because he took out the guy who was in charge of iOS, who brought us iOS, who championed having OS 10, essentially having BSD Unix on a phone, who championed having apps. If not for Scott Forstall, we could be running a Linux iPod phone or whatever I forget the name of the OS on the iPod
Pico?
right now. Pico, yeah. A Pico phone with absolutely no apps. And Tim Cook basically put a bullet in him for the greater good of Apple. He smoothed things out. He focused on people who could play nicely together. Johnny Ive, Bob Mansfield, Eddie Q. What was Air Force One's real name? I'm blanking on that now too.
Federighi.
Yeah, Craig Federighi. And he basically did to Apple's management what Steve Jobs did when he came back to Apple and said desktop, laptop, pro, and consumer. He now has services, technology, design, and software.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting move. I guess a lot of people looked at it and said Forstall has to answer for Maps and Siri. But I mean, that is by far not the whole story, right? I mean, the guy's been there for what,
since
12 years?
Next.
Yeah, like a really long time. So his issues, whatever they may be with, the other executives and the people within the company, far outweigh what the public saw with Siri and Maps. Now that could be, a permutation of those issues, that those things came out the way that they did and kind of faltered a little bit. And, truthfully, I've had plenty to say about Siri, and I haven't had too many problems with Maps, although obviously a lot of people have. The fact that he was so, I don't know, would it be ceremoniously or unceremoniously the way that he was gone?
Yeah, it was interesting, and Cook did not take power and fire Forstall. It was roughly a year later that they reorged. And one of the other interesting things was John Bowett. Am I saying that right? Bowett, I think it was Bowett, something like that.
Yeah.
Who they brought in from a discount UK retailer whom everyone, the minute he was announced, said was a really poor idea for Apple. And he proceeded to do things that really doesn't seem to be in the best interest of Apple retail. And they subsequently fired him. And that was interesting because he was hired and fired under Tim Cook. This wasn't Tim Cook changing Steve Jobs' executive team. This was Tim Cook starting to create his own, faltering and fixing it.
Right. But yeah, he was
Browett, they're saying. Oscar F00 is saying.
It's Browett, yeah. That was a more interesting selection, and obviously the results speak for themselves, but that guy came in under Tim selected him, and a lot of people, like you said at the time, were like, this guy's not right. Even casual observers of the company that probably were able to discern that. And then, like with Forstall, he's out. But what was so shocking is that whereas Forstall, had whatever issues he had internally and then kind of manifested in what we saw in iOS, whether we liked it or didn't like it, Browett was brought in, obviously on the heels of Ron Johnson leaving and going to JCPenney to kind of like steer that ship, the retail ship. Mm-hmm. And things that we heard were just bizarrely disconcerting. Like he wanted to cut people's hours and save, money by not having as many people on the floor, and like
penny wise and pound foolish.
Like it was all completely counterintuitive to like all of the things that made the Apple Store a terrific retail experience to begin with, that people understand. Like there's a reason that there are often more staff members than people in the store. Like, that's why it's good. That's how it works. And like, just the fact that he wanted to like change all these things to save a buck. Like, I get it that some people are driven by like, you know, margins and columns and spreadsheets and stuff, but like, that's not the place to do it. Like, there's plenty of other places in the company to save a buck, but don't do it there, because that is the public face.
But didn't Cook know that going in? I mean, based on this man, it's like you hired the guy to come in and gut the place, and then he started gutting the place, and people were like, oh my God, he's gutting the place, and you fire him. It's like he knew what he was when he picked him up.
Yeah, I know. That's what's so weird about it, is that he was basically like you said, he was a UK retail guy. Like, there was nothing specifically tuned to Apple about him. I guess he was just successful in his previous position, and so that made him appealing to Cook. I don't know why he was selected. Do we know, were there other people in the running for that position?
Yeah, I don't know, but there were always these rumors that Cook and Oppenheimer wanted a leaner, meaner retail operation, and I don't know if he came in, test piloted some projects that was an utter failure that was quickly disposed of. You know, almost like you bring in that guy to do that thing. Like what's his name? Tibor on The Simpsons. You know, like, as long as Tibor is there, Homer doesn't get fired, and you let him kind of do his work. And if it doesn't work out, you know, he's out as fast as he was in.
Yep.
Pilot test guy.
I don't know, the whole Browett retail thing never sat well with me, and I was relieved to hear that he was on his way out, because I personally did not want the Apple stores to change, and I thought that's the last place that they should change. That is like that the retail experience that Apple provides is basically it is textbook, where people said, oh, this is the worst idea you've ever, and then it was completely the best idea they ever had, and it like proved everybody wrong. So like, don't mess with a good thing ever. When it stops working, then you can tinker.
Yeah, you brought in an oasis, and now you're putting up a fast food restaurant. Stop it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned some of the other brouhahas, maps. I mean, much to some people's consternation, New Jersey was included, but other people said that the points of interest were lacking. The turn-by-turn directions were inaccurate. That Apple, there's a huge project. When you do maps, you have to aggregate data from tons of sources. You have to cleanse that data. You have to sanitize it. You have to see, you know, some phone numbers might have dashes, some might have dots, some might be all together, some might have spaces in between. There might be multiple listings for the same place. It might be county names and city names and local names that are all similar. And we know that people like Nokia and Google put feet on the pavement to go and visually inspect and check these things, especially when it's high value things like hospitals or places where it's really important to get it right. And Apple has not had time to do that. And they seem to have floundered in taking the data that they did license from TomTom and other sources and putting it into a consistent, reliable form. There's all these things that Apple shouldn't have released it, but Apple did release it. They're working on it. Is this the big deal that people made it out to be? And is it something fixable? And if it's not, how big a problem is that? Easy questions.
Right. I think it is and isn't the problem that they made it out to be. I think, now we'll expound on these. It is and isn't a problem. It can be fixed, and you know, what that looks like is actually going to depend on who kind of decides to steer that ship. I think it is a problem because map data is something that you really can't mess around with, especially when you're talking about things like finding hospitals and stuff like that. I mean, that is a data stream that people have come to rely on, just like their cellular connection for voice and for data in and of itself. That's just something that, you know, the fact that the Google contract expired and was chosen not to be renewed, and Apple said, that's okay, we're going to do our own thing. Like, Maps should not, it feels like a beta, and it shouldn't be a beta. You know, like Siri can be a beta because Siri it's a selling feature, it's cool, it's fun, it's like a new interface, but you can absolutely use every other part of the phone and never touch. So you can turn Siri off if you want to. But I think that the way people have come to rely on mobile map data, kind of giving them a subpar product and then saying like, isn't it beautiful? Look at Flyover. It's the greatest. And it's like, that doesn't help anybody ever. No one ever said, God,
Superman, Seth.
I could not have done this without flyover.
Superman says that flyover has saved him a good 0.2 seconds when catching Lois from falling helicopters.
Right. No, I would. He's probably the only person that I would buy.
But I mean,
from.
so Google, the contract was expiring. I think they had 6 months left on it, so it would expire midterm. It would not expire during an OS update cycle. It expired in the middle of it. Apple reportedly wanted turn-by-turn navigation, which Google provides for free on Android, and Google would only provide it. So they also wanted vector tiles, and Google would only provide them if, again, reportedly, Apple also took latitude and more onerous location detection stuff that Google wants, because that's how they make money. We're their products; they want our data. So they were at an impasse, and the Apple Maps app just simply could not move forward. So I forget what the technical term is, but you have two bad options, and Apple's bad options were to persist with a crappy Maps app, or that would stay crappy for the foreseeable future, or to make their own Maps app, which would... See, and I know they didn't think it was going to be crappy. They thought that they would be able to make a good Maps app, but reality was they could not make a good Maps app in time, but maybe they will in the future.
Yeah, and they can still fix this, but I think the biggest part of the problem was that it was positioned as a fully finished, full-featured product, and that was how it was presented to people, and that's what people thought they were getting. If they had come out and said, "This is a Herculean job that we're taking on, and we realize it's not great just yet, but it's gonna be great, and it's pretty good right now, and we're really proud of it, and we're really happy, and we think you'll like it anyway." If they had just positioned it as such,
Humbly.
I don't think there would be quite the backlash, because people would say, the way that we're saying, oh, you know what, map data is a tough nut to crack. Instead of saying, and they screwed it up, we would be saying, so we're going to give them a break on this, the iOS 6 release of Maps, and it'll probably be rock solid in 7. It can be fixed. It's not outside of the realm of possibility, but the perception can't be fixed because they introduced it as a finished, polished
It's a black eye.
And it's not. It absolutely isn't.
Jade Weil-Staw is saying that there's no turn-by-turn still in Australia, and some people in the chat room are saying that that they forced Google. This is a theory that started that Apple was brilliant. They tricked Google into making Google Maps for iOS. As far as I know, that's absolutely not true. Apple thought that they would be able to make a fantastic Maps app and kick Google off their phone. The last thing they want, iOS 6 was in large part in order to remove Google and their data hooks from the iPhone. The last thing Apple wanted is for people to flock back to a Google map and restore and even give more information to Google. Google makes far more money on iOS than they make on Android. iOS data is incredibly valuable to Google, who is a competitor of Apple's, and no one likes to be an asset for their competitor. So in no way did Apple foresee this to be the reality of the situation. They thought they were going to make a kick-ass Maps app.
Right. And I mean, the truth of the matter is that when Maps does work properly, it is a very nice app. I mean, the vector maps look great.
Yep.
I personally, I haven't really had any problems with it. I don't rely on it every day. I use it maybe once a month to go somewhere. And the couple of times I've used it, it's been okay. It hasn't been a problem for me. I like it because I haven't had an issue. And I think it's way more attractive than the other maps, and obviously the performance.
In large U.S. cities, it works very well. And the further you get away from large city in U.S., the more it degrades.
Right. Yeah, I've seen some ridiculous pictures from people around the world where it basically looks like an EMP went off in their yard.
But I mean, no one's perfect. I don't know why, but for the last 6 months, both Navigon and Google have decided that I need to drive loops around neighborhoods to go. There'll be a straight line road, and I'll be told to turn left, turn left, turn left, turn left, and then go straight. I don't know who did that. They thought it was a joke. Maybe it's Stephen Colbert. I'm not sure. But someone at some point, has some faulty, and this happens with every Maps app. I think Google's reliability right now, I think they probably have the best data in the world. Maybe Nokia is, in that race too. TomTom somewhere there as well, but no one is providing me perfect directions yet.
I know, and the worst part is that I wish that something like, what is it, OpenStreetMap? Is that the first one? I wish that all of these companies could come together and pool their data and license it the way that patents, like the MP3 consortium and stuff like that initially, because that, the MP3 became a standard for that reason. There were a bunch of companies that got together and said, hey, this is the direction we want to go in. Here's the format that we're going to use. How great would it be for that to happen for map data? Consumers would absolutely win them, because you would be able to collate all that data and always have the best data, no matter where you are. There would never
compete on interface, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, interface, add-ons, there's so many other layers you can apply if the map data is right from the start. And I feel like we're still fighting a battle that should be over.
Uh, yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And Sokral was just talking about MP3s, piracy, and iTunes, and that reminded me that iTunes 11, it was announced along with the iPhone 5 and the new iPods. It was delayed by a month, and then it was released. It was said to be an all-new version of iTunes. Certainly it looks like an all-new version of iTunes. We've spoken briefly about it on Iterate, Seth, but you have told me privately that you don't think it's gotten anywhere near the lashing that it deserves.
Yeah, okay, so, it works, right? You open it up and it plays your music.
It starts. The app starts.
Right. The app starts and it works. But a lot of people have said, I'm certainly not the first nor the only one, that Apple has started to really drag its feet, fall down, however you want to put it, when it comes to their software experiences, right? Like there are a lot of gaps and a lot of questionable choices that they're making now that maybe 5 years ago would not have even crossed the mind of developers that was acceptable. And one of the things that I think people like about Apple is that there is a consistency among the apps. Like iPhoto and iMovie used to feel like two parts of the same puzzle, and iTunes kind of fit into that, and all the different pieces plug in together. And I feel like this latest iteration of iTunes is so far afield of what not like what people are expecting, but what a direction that they should be going in to like kind of unify the interface. And I know the argument would be made, oh, but they are, because it looks more like, the iPad, the music app. There are so many things about it because it is an app, a legacy app that has been built on, and things have been bolted into it, and new functionality has been, drilled into its foundation. It needs to be killed, summarily killed, put out woodshed and shot. And
buried upside down, and the earth has to be salted above it.
And it needs to start again. Like there's no fixing it at this point. And you could go in any direction you want, whether it's functionally, if you right click on something, there's one menu. If you click on an arrow, there's a different menu with some of the same things, but not some of the other ones. You want to talk the interface? I mean, it's baffling to me, some of the choices that they've made, just looking at the main window, like the default views and the width of certain things and the placement of certain buttons. It's a train wreck. It's an absolute train wreck. And yeah, again, you turn it on, it plays your music, it's fine. But if you're really going to deconstruct it and think about it in terms of like, what should Apple be doing? Where should this be going? Since iTunes is such a flagship thing for them, like probably the biggest consumer app that they have, it's not good. It just isn't.
Sokral is arguing that it's an intermediary step, that it's as far as Apple could get done in time, and that there will be another version that takes it the next step. And he's also saying, oh God, Seth, oh God, it's not all that bad.
No, and I know, and I'm fired up mostly because we've talked about it for 3 weeks and said like, oh, let's do a show where we talk about it, and then we just haven't been able.
It does have popover on top, like what do you call it? Nested, compounded popovers, which can never be good.
Yeah, honestly, I'm sure if we had Mark here, he would be able to talk about this in a much more lucid and technical manner, but with that dreamy accent. But it just it's not a good app. It just isn't. It's functional and it does what it's supposed to do most of the time, but it's not a good app. Don't tell me it's a good app.
No, it's a it is by design a severely compromised app. It was originally a music, was it SoundJam, Soundbox, something like that? It was originally a music playing app, and Apple is bolted on and added to and built upon, and it serves too many masters. It is an app of all trades and a good one at none. And it's also one of the only apps Apple has to wrap up, try to figure out how to get core animation, core audio, core video, everything like that, and port it over to Windows, which is probably why it's still a monolithic mess of a monster app in many ways. Is it better than it was in the previous version? I don't know. I understood it. I understood what it was. I don't know what it is. I just hope that I will like where it eventually gets to.
Yeah. I mean, at its core, it's a big database app. When you think about it, it's just, here are the records that I need to display, not records like albums, but like, line records, information. If you think about it in terms of that, like these are the files and these are the things that I need to point to. the further away it gets from that without kind of starting over, the more complicated the interface becomes. And like my big concern is like, I'll figure it out. I'm fine with it. Like I'm pretty much used to it already, as much as I don't like it. But like I've put a lot of faith into it, and I have a lot of files in iTunes at home, especially like on the Mac Mini server. That thing has everything in iTunes because we have the Apple TV upstairs. How the minute that causes me to doubt, like things are breaking or like I'm losing files or something happens, like that's it for me. Like I don't know what I'm gonna do, but it like that's that. As long as it remains the hub for all of these things, I'm always gonna have this like fear and this little bit of doubt that like something's gonna break. It's not gonna work the way I need it to because it continues to become more complicated. And I'm not saying it's an easy job to fix it, but it has to be done at some point. They've got to either strip it completely back, or they have to decouple all of these things that are combined in it and give people dedicated apps, as much as that sucks. Like you've got an app store on the iPhone and you have iTunes on the iPhone. Like we need to break those things out. Like it needs to be different.
That makes it harder to I mean, Mech1164 is saying that it's still lipstick on a pig. And I think that's what's unusual because, you know, with iMovie, Apple scrapped the old app, started over, and then has slowly been restoring functionality. With Final Cut Pro 10, the same thing happened. Arguably with Maps, the same thing is happening. This is not that. They did not scrap iTunes 10, start over with a completely new app, and have to start adding back functionality. They kept the same app and skinned it. So it has all the functionality, but it's differently usable. And that's not something I'm used to seeing from Apple. I'm not used to seeing, to put it in Battlestar Galactica parlance, skin jobs.
Yeah, we could go on all night about this, but like I said, it's functional, but it's not nice.
Yeah, you use it because you have to, not because you want to.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. We touched on it briefly, but the iPad 4 is now the only iPad in the 2012 lineup that doesn't have Apple's new design language. It doesn't have the anodized backplate, the writer angled curves. It doesn't have the thinner design. That's about the only big change I can see them doing next year. But do you think that it's missing that? Is it the odd man out? Is it a strange sort of out of time device now?
I think it is for a little while, just because, you know, everything is moving on to that new design language and it kind of does stick out now. But at the same time, it's like, it's very familiar, and I don't think people were expecting it. Like regular people aren't really expecting that to change. I think when they go in, they're looking for it and they're recognizing it and being like, okay, that's the iPad. And then there's the Mini, and like, oh, okay, that's the Mini. That's different, and it kind of looks like the phone, but not exactly. I would be shocked if the next version of the larger iPad didn't follow that same, you know, anodized backplate look and feel. And I think that when that happens, they're going to be really, really nice devices, and I'm going to probably want to play with them. But
see, now you know where I'm leading you with this, because you originally were not. We had very similar experiences with the iPad Mini. We both, when we heard it was not going to be Retina, we were both trepidatious because our gentle, soft pupils cannot handle the sandpaper that are standard definition pixels. We've grown up on the iPhone 4, 4S, the Retina iPad, and we didn't want to go back. Now, we both bought it when it came out. You tried it for a couple of days. I was forced to use it for over a week to write a review. I'm going to let you go first, though, Seth, because I think your story is much more interesting.
Well, I mean, for people that come to the live shows or have listened to the podcast, the story goes like this. Rene and I basically took opposite sides when it came to what do we think the iPad Mini is really all about.
But how long had you used it for at that point?
I got it, you know, as soon as it came out, and I basically loaded all my stuff on it, used it for about an hour or two, and was like, not for me.
Yeah.
Not my thing.
And I was forced to use it for a week because I had to write a review about it, like a 10,000 word review or something insane.
And I think that the time afforded the device definitely changes your perception of it, which I did not realize. I kind of went with a very quick gut judgment, like, yeah, I'm looking at this. It's not what I want. It's not for me.
My eyes.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it wasn't so much the retina or the non-retina rather that was the stopping point. It was more the visual elements. And at that point, when the mini came out, admittedly, I was using my larger iPad a lot. Like just prior to that, I was using it a lot. So I was used to seeing things at a certain size. And when I saw the mini, everything felt too crowded, too compressed. The banner notifications were hard to read. Like everything was just not the way that I needed it to be. I felt like they compromised in that they really did just kind of cram it into the display without, treating those little elements in their own way. And what ended up happening was I just was like, yeah, it's not for me. Put it in the test pool at work, and that was that. And so I didn't think about it. And then I started thinking about it and I realized that I wasn't using my iPad at all. And I have, the Kindle Fire. I bought the HD after having the one last year just because I still think it's a kind of cool device. I like, Amazon stuff and I like to play and
You're
compare.
a
And
masochist. I understand. I accept that.
totally fine. Well, truth be told, the screen on the HD is actually really nice.
Yes.
And it's a really nice device for reading. And Panzerino agrees with me. So there. Um, But basically, I kept thinking about it, and everybody that I knew, everybody I talked to was like, "Oh yeah, the mini. I don't even touch the big one anymore. It's great." Justin got one. Our CFO got one, and every single person was like saying the same thing. And I started to feel like I was going crazy. Like, did I miss something? Did I not give it due diligence? And so I finally buckled and ordered one, and it arrived, and I was like, okay, I feel good that I made the decision to do this. And then I started using it and like put the big one away, started using the little one, and something weird happened. And the weird thing that happened
Your
was
heart grew 2 sizes that day.
that's exactly. I am completely head over heels, like stupid, crazy teenage in love with it now. And I don't understand it. It doesn't even make sense to me, but I can't put it down. And it really, I think it is, if you just break that, like maybe it's a 2-day barrier where you stop noticing the things you don't like,
Yeah.
comes the device that you always really wanted because it is a fantastic size and weight. And then you stop seeing the things that you don't like and you're like, well, look at all the things I can do. I take it from room to room. I always have it with me. I can hold the baby and still hold it. It's not ridiculous. Like I have it in bed. It's comfortable to read with. I can, have it on my lap. It's like there's nothing there. It's a fantastic device. And I don't know why I was so against it. I really don't. And you know what? I'm the first person to say, hey, you know what? I was wrong about that. I have no problem going back on my word and eating my words or whatever expression you want to use. I have no problem with it. And in this case, nothing could be more true. I totally blew it by not giving it a fair shake.
Hallelujah, hallelujah. Yeah, it is a Christmas miracle. I had the same reaction. At first, I was like, I felt like I was going back in time. I thought I was taking a step back. I had a Retina iPad 3. The Retina iPad 4 arrived the same day as the iPad mini, so I had both. And I was looking at it, and one was one of the best displays I'd ever seen, and the other looked like my iPhone 3GS, but bigger. And I didn't think I'd like it, but one of the primary things I use with my iPad is a mobile hotspot. Whenever I'm out, I have an iPad with me and I tether to that because I don't want to run down the battery on my phone. And if I have to edit the site while I'm out, Drupal does not play nicely on a small iPad screen. On a small iPhone screen. So I use the iPad, and the most important things to me ended up being the things that the iPad mini were really good at. The battery life is as long as the iPad 4. Everything about it is as good, but it just feels lighter, faster. It feels all those things, and it's difficult to explain. But as I used it, I just came to enjoy it more and more. I don't want to say it's the iPad as it was meant to be, because I always have a MacBook with me, and if I don't have a MacBook with me, I would rather use the iPad 4 for typing, for doing a lot of productivity work. But since I always have that MacBook with me, the iPad mini becomes just the best possible iPad for me.
Yeah. I mean, my arguments when we talked about it were I like the bigger screen on the larger iPad because I do a lot of writing on there. I do, GarageBand stuff. I do play with music apps. I do stuff like that. And what I came to realize is that I wasn't using the larger iPad. It was just sitting there. And so these theoretical arguments as to why the larger screen made more sense were great, but I wasn't even putting them into practice. And I was using my phone a lot, but I was thinking I had post ideas or things I wanted to write, and I was like, I don't feel like picking it up. And one of the things I really like is the Logitech ultra thin keyboard. I've really grown to enjoy using that iPad, and it doesn't fit great with the mini, but I was with the smart cover, I kind of like folded it back and parked it on top, and I was like, okay, this is good enough. And I wrote 1,000 words on it yesterday morning, without an issue, and proofread and posted from there, and was just like, holy crap, this is it. Like, I don't even need to debate it anymore.
Yeah, it really does sort of grow on you. Like, you have to give it a chance, because Apple basically it could have two of three things. It could have the 10-hour battery life, it could have the thinness and lightness, or it could have a Retina display. And a Retina iPad with 3 or 4 hours of battery life is a non-starter. A Retina iPad that's as thick as an iPad 4, if not thicker, is a non-starter. So they chose what ended up being the same compromise that was good for me. Was, yes, the screen's not Retina, but everything else about it is top of the line.
Right.
It really is one of the most beautiful, best built devices they've ever made. So going back to what led me into this discussion, Seth, if come March we get a iPad 5 that has the same design language, that's thinner and lighter, like an iPad mini, and maybe, let's just say for the sake of argument, we get an iPad mini with a Retina display that's as dense as an iPhone 5, which device would then be for you if you have much closer capabilities in both?
Ooh, I think honestly, if we had that choice, the larger iPad with the Retina screen and the body, and then the smaller iPad, obviously with much less weight and a Retina screen, I think I'd probably go with the mini again, because now that I've had it, now that I've seen that, it is a very able device, I think that I really do like that better. I think it is far more portable. It's the kind of thing that, like, I used to feel kind of lame dragging my iPad into a meeting to like take notes or something.
Look, it's iPad guy. How you doing, iPad guy? Take some notes on your iPad guy.
You start to feel like, oh, look, it's the guy taking notes on his iPad. Okay, great. We get like your iPad. But like this thing, like, it's like a little book, and you kind of just flip it out and it's there and then it's gone. And it's so small and it's so thin. I think that size is really the one that I wanted.
It's the soft cover compared to the hard cover of the iPad, of the big iPad.
Yeah, I think it's just a much more human-sized device. And that, there'll be plenty of people who say the bigger one is always going to be better. There are people who are asking for
Mark
an even
wants
bigger...
a 21-inch iPad.
I know he does. But for like day-to-day, take it around with you kind of use cases, I don't think you can beat this size. I think it's just the best.
Yeah, what's odd for me is that when Apple has done different size products of similar capabilities previously. They have the MacBook Air 11-inch and the MacBook Air 13-inch. And yes, the 13-inch is slightly more powerful. It's got more pixels, yada, yada, yada. But they're very similar machines. And I know a lot of bloggers Georgia loves the 11-inch MacBook Air. She wants the smallest, easiest to carry around MacBook possible. And I went for the 11-inch because I wanted the extra pixels, the vertical pixel height, because I do development, some web stuff, I do design stuff, I do Photoshop. That was important to me. And now I've switched to a Retina MacBook Pro 15-inch, and I was willing to give up size and portability and all those things to have those Retinas and those pixels. But because I have that device, I think I would skew towards the iPad mini as well, because it's like I want the highest high end I can have, and then the lowest low end is fine. Then I'm covering the range of my needs.
Yeah. We all have 15-inch MacBook Pros at the office, non-Retina, because we've got
eyes.
Well, see, I was just saying this. I think it was J-Baby online today. I don't have a problem with the non-Retina display on the laptop because I use it at a distance, and I've been using laptops for so long that it's just that's how I expect it to be. Once I saw the Retina display on a mobile device, it was like, the world changed forever. But I've seen the Retina MacBook Pro.
It was like Morpheus had awakened you in the Matrix.
No, it really was. And I've seen it. I've used it. It's an amazing device. It's gorgeous. But I don't need Retina there. Like, I'm not doing the kind of work where that kind of screen is going to be a huge benefit to me.
Just don't look at one for too long, Seth, because you'll come on the show and go, damn it!
I just think, listen, the iPad Mini, that, like buying that on a whim and saying like, oh, I need to have this. It's a lot different than a $2,300
Yeah,
laptop.
absolutely.
That's like, isn't that entry level price? Isn't it like 22 to get in the door? And then if you really want it to be good,
It goes from unseemly to ungodly very quickly on the price scale.
so I thought about it. I will be getting probably an Air before I get that because I feel like
A Retina Air?
nah, let's not even go there. Let's not even. I feel like portability and the ability to use my tools when and where I want them is more valuable to me now, and that's something that I came to realize with the Mini is that I'd rather have this thing with me and when I have the idea to write, whip it out and write it and just be done and be like great, and then fold it up and put it away, as opposed to oh I've got this idea, let me leave myself a reminder that I want to write about it later, and then really never get back to that idea because I'm not in that moment, like. That's where the Mini made a difference for me. It was like, if I've got it, I'm going to use it. And if I use it, I'm going to do the things that I think I want to do when I want to do them, as opposed to sometime later when I'm probably going to forget. And so the Retina display is not the deal breaker for me on the laptop. I think that I do need a bigger screen. I need a 15-inch screen because when I do work, I do need a little bit extra space to kind of move things around. So were there a 15-inch Air, I think that would be my computer no matter what. Retina or not.
It's amazing how, and it sounds silly because these are premium luxury items, but there are always compromises. You can't have everything. It's not, Apple doesn't offer every model. They don't make every screen size at every half-inch increment. But also there are the laws of physics, the laws of economics, and Apple just can't make everything yet. And we still have to decide between the portability of an Air and the power of a Pro. The smallness and the sleekness of an iPad Mini and the power of a full-size iPad, the cheapness of an iPhone 4 versus the, I don't even know what it is, the awesome quality of an iPhone 5. And all of these, you can't have everything. You just got to make the best choice that you can with the money and the time that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the lesson that I am taking away from the Mini experiment is as I said, I'd rather have the tool I want to use with me than the theoretical best tool for the things that I want to do. The Retina iPad is better in so many ways, and the Retina MacBook is better in so many ways. But when I want to sit down and work, or when I want to write, or when I want to do something, I want to just do it. And for me right now, the stuff that I'm doing, if I'm really honest with myself, the Mini is a better tool because I'm going to have it with me. I'm going to use it as opposed to, oh, well, it's nice, but,
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. So let's just wrap this up with, what do you want to see from Apple in 2013, Seth? What is if you were the secret power behind the throne at Apple, what would you be having them do in 2013?
Fix their web services. Honestly, isn't this the chink in the armor for them? Like, they have the really nice hardware, they've got the nice software integration, but the missing link for all of this stuff is iCloud and reliability and stuff like that. Like, I still don't feel like they've got that ironed out. I think hardware, they can continue to iterate and roll out nicer, lighter, better versions of what we have currently in our hands for the next 2 years. But what they need to do is they need to take all the things that they're promising, all the magic of iCloud, and make it work every single solitary time and make it so stupidly easy to use that, I don't even have to consider where my data is or what I'm doing, because that's really the promise of iCloud. But if you even stop to think about what's happening, behind the scenes and how the gears are turning, anybody who actually understands computers, it runs in the other direction.
Yeah, I mean, and that is a non-trivial thing to fix. I wrote an article about that a while ago, and I joked that it's much easier for Google to buy designers and developers than for Apple to do a mock funeral for web objects and come out with a modern, lightweight, powerful, highly scalable, incredibly powerful web framework. But it's not really a joke. That is really a tough problem, and I hope they do invest. It's hard to get the talent. It's hard to get it's hard to get the scale that the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons have done, and you don't get it by buying Twitter. That's just silly. But they do urgently need to address that, because if Lauren Richter can put out a game in tear down your social gaming network in a fortnight, then you have a severe problem.
Yeah, I mean, forgive me for making it sound trivial. It's not. It's an enormous problem, and it's a huge engineering issue that they can solve, because if anybody has the money to hire the right people, it's Apple, right? I mean, they've got the ability to do that. But I think it needs to become a focal point, because as they continue to extend these platforms and yet connect them all back together, that's going to be the thing that holds it in place. And until that stuff is like absolutely rock solid reliable, there's always going to be these little points of like falling down where it doesn't quite perform the way people are expecting. And as soon as your expectations are not met as a user, you start to just not be as happy. And
what
I think
about Johnny Ive and redesigning? I mean, we hear people say, and I dismiss this usually when someone says iOS is boring, because it's not the job of an operating system to entertain you. That's why Apple wants you to move from icons into apps and stay in apps. But a lot of people, Steve Kovac from Business Insider said he's replaced every default Apple app with the Google equivalent, the Gmail app, the Google Maps app, G+. And there's an argument to be made that one of the best Google phones on the planet right now isn't an Android device, but it's an Apple device. And that's Apple's competitor having a huge footprint once again on their phone. And this time one Apple doesn't control. Does Apple have to do remarkable and amazing things in iOS 7?
I mean, what can they do? They're not going to do stuff in iOS 7.
Aluminum, our new theme. It's called Aluminum.
They're not going to do stuff
Aluminium.
Inside of a year in iOS 7 that is going to change someone's mind who's heavily invested in Google services and sees that Google apps hang together a lot better than Apple apps do, right? There's just not enough time to do that before the next software release. I think what they can do is look at how Google is doing stuff and say, oh, wow, you know what? All this company that we can't stand has all these disparate apps that work better in tandem than our, purported apps should work together. And, what's the lesson that we can take away from it? I don't think there's anything they can do to fix it or to change the minds of people who are just, in that ecosystem. But I think there's a lot of lessons to take away from how Google is doing stuff to make their own stuff work better. I think that's super important.
Kenneth Joseph Kefe hope I said that right, in the chat room is saying swipe to dismiss notifications. You can already do that. Swipe slightly downwards, swipe to the right, the notification is gone. Swipe to switch between apps. You can do that already on the iPad, but not the iPhone. Just multitask, forcing your swipe between apps. But you see, what I want is, like, I have a Nexus 4 now. I've been using a Nexus 4 for the last couple of days, and I have a thread about it in the Android Central forums. And for everything I like better about it, there's something I like worse. It's still, people say that they're outpacing Apple, but in many ways, like, the interface still drives me out of my mind. And the idea of widgets is still stupefying to me. And this is something I hope, Google's starting to address that with actionable notifications. And that's what I want. I don't need to go to the data anymore. I'm busy doing things. I want the data to come to me. I like that Siri presents widgets. I like that Notification Center presents widgets. I like that Google, like WebOS did, has actual notifications, but that's what I want. I want everything coming to me now. I don't want to have to go looking for things anymore. And I certainly don't want to hang out on a home screen like it's a playground and just glance at all data things as I swipe around.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, that's one of the things that probably we, as, quote unquote power users, would want to see more than anything is enhance the way that the data is actually presented to us, make it more efficient. But, we always keep coming back to this, where we are no longer the target market for these devices.
We never were. They were never for geeks.
No, certainly not.
Android was for geeks, but iOS has always been for my mom and my sister.
Yeah, and as reductive as that sounds, it's a really tough thing to do to satisfy all of these different types of users with one single device. And I feel like they're kind of getting there. Stuff like Notification Center definitely is a nod to that. Like, hey, we realize that people who need more actually do need more, and we're trying to help help that process along.
Let me ask you this, Seth. I am the only one. There are 5 iPhone owners in my family. I am the only one that uses Notification Center, that uses the Fast App Switcher, that uses any of the features that are more disguised. And for as much talk as the internet makes about, Apple should let us set our own default, so I can have Chrome as my browser and Google Maps as my maps. This is something that would never occur to any of those people in my family. And I know that you have other people around you with iPhones. Are these issues with iOS as big in the mainstream as we make them out to be in the tech press?
No, certainly not. We live in a microcosm of hyper focus on things that most normal people could not possibly care any less about. It's ludicrous to think that the things that we choose to focus on would ever even cross the desk of a lot of the people at Apple, because they are such edge cases that we make into much larger things. But that's not to say that they're not important, and that's not to say that they're not going to be valuable someday.
They're on Woz's list below copy and paste. Jaws's list below copy and paste.
It's really, really, really far ahead of where the device needs to be. We're where we want it to be, but it's not where it needs to be. And like I said, there's value in that, and because looking at where the OS is now as to where it started, obviously a lot of the stuff that we asked for, that's the stuff that I used to jailbreak for, that I said, oh, I will never not jailbreak a phone. I don't jailbreak anymore because I
don't hear people talking about it as much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, that could just be, technical reasons, or it's harder, or there's not a great public solution. I don't need to do it, because the things that I used to jailbreak for, that I needed to speed up my phone to be productive, they're pretty much there.
Except for Byte SMS, I have everything I needed.
Let's not even get into that. That's
Still angry about Byte SMS.
Getting there. The OS grows every year. The OS adds little things. I still forget that, when someone's calling you, you can swipe up and do the quick reply with a message and stuff like I loved that when it came out. I still
not even using those built-in features anymore.
That's what I mean. There are little bits of complexity that I still enjoy that most people don't even know about. So I feel like there are still places for the OS to go that will please us greatly and still be usable to people, but they are going to be hidden. They are not going to be tent poles. They are going to be things that we are happy with, that are there, but they're things that normal people won't even care about.
So I guess the very last thing is the competitive landscape. We've talked about Apple and Android, and there'll certainly be a Galaxy S4 next year, and an HTC 4K phone, or whatever the hell they're making. But there also might be new things. There might be an Amazon Kindle phone for the first time. Mark Zuckerberg and company are, as far as I know, still working on a Facebook phone. They just launched a Poke app so that they will have a built-in sexting client when this phone launches. There will be a large variety of very talented other companies maybe getting into the phone game, already beginning in the tablet game. Where do you see Apple stacking up with these?
I think that Apple and the iPhone are pretty well entrenched in the consumer mind space, so much so that while there may be a Facebook phone, there may be an Amazon phone, they may be successful. I'm not going to say, they're not even going to have a chance. I think
they will pay you $100 to take an Amazon phone because they'll make it up on movies.
Right. I mean, people will buy them. I bought the Kindle Fires because I was curious, and, I still think for certain use cases, they're okay devices. People will buy them. Those phones will sell. They won't sell as many as the iPhones. They won't sell as many as Android in aggregate. But mobile is, as big as mobile is, we are looking at the tip of the iceberg. This is the future without being, resorting to hyperbole.
Seth, Google is making an X phone with Motorola to compete against both Apple and Samsung, because Samsung is now competition to Google.
Well, if you look at it on that level of let's talk, real economic, shifting in markets and all that, and the acquisitions, and really get nerdy, we could completely lose ourselves. You asked me, where does Apple fit into all this? I think they fit in exactly where they've been fitting in that they have an incredibly strong brand. People know it. People like it. They continue to sell millions upon millions. Every single phone they release sells more than the previous phone. I don't think they have anything to worry about. I think the market is big enough to support other stuff, but I don't think there's going to be anything that's going to supplant the iPhone in consumer minds in the near future.
Despite all the crazy analysts this year, like every year, telling us that Apple has peaked, that Apple has gone through the looking glass, that Apple is no longer that which in days of old moved earth and heaven.
Just think about who those analysts are writing for. It's people like us.
They're writing for clients to manipulate people like us.
Yeah. Well, they can write what they want. There's that, and then there's, real, actual reality. So
real reality. I've heard of this reality, Seth. Sometimes it's cold and I have to pay for things, but I've heard about it.
Right.
All right, sir. Well, I want to thank you for joining me on this year-end Apple and iOS Palooza. If people are interested in you, the stuff you're writing, the things that you're developing, Seth, where can they find you?
You can find me on app.net and Twitter. I'm Seth Clifford in both places. And if you want to see some of the work that we do at our company, nickelfish.com.
Nice. And we pre-recorded 2 episodes of Iterate for the holidays. We have a Christmas episode and a New Year's episode, and we have Brad Ellis, Louis Mantilla, and Jesse Char from Pacific Helm joining us. And we also have a roundtable with David Barnard and Russell Ivanovich on the future of app stores. I'm looking forward to both of those.
Yep. Good stuff.
Check them out. You will have lots to listen to. All right. Well, you can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find all of us at iMore. You can email us at podcast@imore.com. And for all of our shows, you can go to mobilenations.com/shows or just check them out on iMore when we post them. Seth, thank you for joining us. Everyone in the chat room, thank you so much for joining us. I'll give you some teasers for Debug too. Guy English and I sat down and did interviews with Dave Tier from 1Password, which will be out, I believe, tomorrow, and with Craig Hockenberry and Sean Heber of Twitterific. So we have tons and tons of good stuff coming to you this holiday season.
Yeah, cool.
You shan't be podcastless. And we're going to do a Mobile Nations podcast a year end. Actually, we're going to do a Mobile Nations CES preview, I think, next week. So it'll be a lot of fun stuff. Is that the best Christmas movie ever, Die Hard?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's between that and Elf for me. Like, you sit on a throne of lies and stink of meat and cheese.
Yeah. I think I need to go buy Die Hard. I was actually thinking about watching it today.
Santa's coming! I know him! I buy all that. I buy into Will Ferrell completely in those characters.
Yeah, I know. He really sells it.